Bonn Park is supported by 100 Mile Produce. As a fifth-generation farmer, Robert Foreman's earliest memories of the St. Jacobs Farmers Market involved transporting sweet corn and pickling cucumbers with his father from their family's small farm in Bruce County. Today, 100 Mile Produce carries a wide variety of seasonal vegetables including sweet corn, pumpkins, green onions, beets, cucumbers, kale, carrots, broccoli, cauliflower, and garlic. And everything he sells comes from within a 27-kilometer radius of his 24-acre farm in Belgrave, where Foreman deals exclusively with Amish and Mennonite farmers. Robert Foreman has much respect for the rugged, hardworking, entrepreneurial spirit of the farming families he works with, their lifestyle, and their environmental stewardship, sometimes gardening on only a few acres of land. Serving Waterloo region of the St. Jacobs Farmers Market for decades, 100 Mile Produce has built a loyal customer base that feels more like a community. Regular customers see the many benefits of buying locally grown food and understand how purchasing food from local food producers can strengthen our wider community. 100 Mile Produce is a proud farming tradition here in Southern Ontario. You can meet them at the St. Jacobs Farmers Market from mid-May to Christmas. It will give you a better appreciation for the fertile soil that surrounds us. Bonn Park is supported by artisanal cheesemaker Mountain Oak Cheese. Since the beginning, Mountain Oak Cheese has been a purveyor of all-natural and award-winning fine Gouda made with wholesome ingredients and a traditional Dutch recipe available in a variety of ages and flavors. Serving southwestern Ontario and headquartered near the historic town of New Hamburg, Mountain Oak Cheese was founded by Adam van Bergijk and his wife Hanny, who took over the family dairy farm in Holland from Adam's parents in 1976. Together they attended the renowned Cheesemakers School in Gouda, a center for cheesemaking expertise for over 300 years. A small family-owned and operated business, their primary concern is quality, as they have stayed true to their roots using only the best ingredients and being involved in the entire cheesemaking process from beginning to end. Their great-tasting Gouda-style cheeses are made with fresh milk from their own dairy cows, treating their animals with respect and personal care while protecting their environment by producing their cheese right on their farm and in their modern, state-of-the-art processing plant. Every cheese they make is handled with care and aged naturally, bringing out the best characteristics of their milk and the work that has gone into each step. Their 2-year-old farmstead Gouda is similar in texture to Parmesan and bursts with flavor, while their black pepper Gouda has a natural caramel-like sweetness. Their must-try smooth and creamy smoked Gouda, naturally applewood smoked in their own facility, is just wow. Cheese shopping can be a fascinating culinary adventure, and Mountain Oak Cheese is a great place to start. Whether you prefer mild, rustic, robust, or mature cheese that brings out a special essence and complexity, or something fiery and flavorful with a little chili pepper bite on the finish, Mountain Oak Cheese will hook you up. Oh, and they also make refreshing and delicious quark, a great source of protein, calcium, and a variety of vitamins and minerals. Check out mountainoakcheese.ca. You can order online or give them a call at 519-662-4967 or visit their store at 3165 Huron Road, New Hamburg. Whether you're a cheese expert or have never ventured beyond cheddar, Mountain Oak Cheese will treat you very Gouda. Sorry, that pun was really cheesy.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Jessie Votary. Jessie is the leader, mastermind, and general manager of Ramshackle Industries in Stratford. They have 5 worker-owned restaurants. She's going to tell us all about them. She is charming, she is delicious, and she is a force to be reckoned with.
And so insightful
Yeah.
and candid when it comes to the restaurant business and talking about kitchens and customers. And this is such a refreshing, amazing look at that whole lifestyle.
And I can't wait to share it with everybody. Here she is, Jessie Votary.
It's a new COVID world, shining, shimmering, sanitized. Tell me, people, are servers finally human in your eyes? We can serve you the food, but we cannot keep distant. Are you feeling resistant to these rules? Don't criticize a COVID world. Constant hand washing to do. Now we can tell you no and where to go. We're rigorously cleaning.
COVID world, there's only room for half of you. Hand sanitizer everywhere, no time to spare. You might wait an extra hour or two.
I'm experiencing fear with you.
Unbelievable. All these feelings we're feeling.
All right, Jessie Votary, thank you so much for joining us on Bonn Park
It's a pleasure to be here.
in 40-degree weather.
Yeah,
Yes, welcome.
It's a heat wave. It seems air conditioned in here, so that's
It
good.
is, yeah.
So I'd like to know, how did the two of you meet?
So Jessie and I met at my mother's funeral,
As you do.
as people do. Jessie is married to my glorious nephew, Zach. And as soon as I saw Zach's friendly face, I think what I said when I walked up to you was something like, "Hi, I'm Aunt Sara. I'm the black sheep of the family. It's really nice to meet you."
And I think I replied something to the effect of, I can relate.
Yeah,
It's very similar for me.
Yeah, I am too. It's something like that, and it made me feel very comfortable. When weird is good. That's what we were just talking about before we hit record. Weird is good. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And it was a pleasure to meet you pre-COVID. So I think there were hugs, which was nice. There are no hugs now. So
It was hard not to hug when I saw you guys tonight. I am a hugger, like boobs in, everything, arms wrapped around you, breathing down your neck type hugger, and I'm having a hard time in COVID.
it's a strange thing. It's interesting in the restaurant business, as I am. A lot of guests try to hug you, particularly if you're a woman in restaurants. So it's kind of nice. Not everybody tries to hug
Not
me,
everybody
and
tries
if they
to hug
try,
you.
I'm like, oh, sorry, it's the COVID.
Right. It's actually been very enlightening to hear from people that I know to say to me like, "Oh, I actually don't like being touched." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell me that ages ago?" I don't want to
It's now
make
become
you
appropriate.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
It's now become appropriate to say, no touching.
thanks.
No touching.
Yeah.
Thank you.
However, is everyone going to procreate and repopulate the earth after this?
That's it. I think you'll still touch the people you like to touch that way.
We'll see what the pandemic effect is on young people in dating.
Can you
There's gotta be an
imagine
app for that.
Tinder in the time of COVID?
Maybe swiping won't be there anymore. Maybe there's like left. Right? Is that the right app? I'm too old. I've been with the same man since I was 17.
I think you've got it.
I'm trying to imagine how the hugs are going to come back. Like, is Doug
You just want one from me.
Ford going to say one afternoon, "Go ahead and hug
It'll
those
be
around you"?
after he's had his family over and got
Right.
caught.
Well,
and then
he
the
did.
announcement will
He
come
did,
out.
right? Like
Yeah.
he actually said, so when they brought it to, you could have a 10-person circle, and then they said, and you can hug. Like they actually had to release it from the government that we could touch each other again, right? And it's funny. So there's a young man that works for me who doesn't have close family, and he's been very much by himself throughout the last kind of 4 months. And I said, do you want a hug? And he was like, "Are you in my circle?" I was like, "You can be in my circle." And he just came in for this,
He needed it.
right? Like he doesn't have a girlfriend. His parents don't live with him, and I was like, you legitimately have not had human contact in 4 months.
So there's a lot to be said for like touch. Like
Yeah.
touch is incredibly important for your endorphin response and for your emotional well-being and all that jazz, right?
It's incredible. And it was like this huge relief in him just to have contact with someone. So I think it'll come back naturally. I think all of a sudden we'll be like, oh my God, I need to touch people.
Jessie is our first guest from Stratford.
We're closer than like the other side of Kitchener-Waterloo, I think.
That's true, actually. If you need to get anything over by Fairway or Old
geographically.
King, it takes a half hour.
Yeah.
It is.
Geographically.
It's true.
And I feel like I've rediscovered Stratford through your beautiful videos you've put together. Stratford looks incredible in those films.
Right? It's our co-videos, as they are. I just coined that just now. So genius. And bing. So we've been doing, I've had a lot more time on my hands than I normally do, running 5 restaurants. Right now, running them is not really a thing. And so Zach, my lovely husband, is a very talented videographer. And so we've been making 90s Disney musical remakes.
I am all in and like slightly jealous that I'm not the one singing because I have spent some time singing those songs.
Well, it's funny because as I've realized throughout making these videos that I'm a little behind in the Disney World times. These songs, of course, from The Little Mermaid and from Aladdin and coming up from Beauty and the Beast are
So excited.
yes, right? I know they're very 90s girl movies.
So people are looking for Moana and
yeah, people are
whatever
like,
the other new stuff is.
oh, are you going to do Frozen?
Right,
And I'm
Frozen.
like, I've never seen Frozen. Also, that song is really difficult.
Very difficult.
It's like, I can do the chorus, but other than that, I don't actually even know how the song goes to like rewrite the lyrics.
There's some other songs in there you might be able to poach.
Yeah, do you want to build a snowman?
That's a good one. Yep.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking. I'm like, you should watch the movie. I cried, full on cried. My kids were like, Mom, it's going to be okay.
Oh, I cry in Beauty and the Beast every time.
Oh, yeah. So I'm singing along, like, oh my gosh, what's habanero and why does it burn? So great. Oh my goodness.
I want to know about you and Connor Scully.
Yeah.
Your voices are amazing. You must. Yeah, do you have training? Especially Connor's Backstreet Boys, like reaching out. And just pulling
I
back.
know, right?
Like it's so good.
So Connor is a pro. Connor is legitimately, Connor is legitimately a pro. He was in a show at the Festival Theatre 4 years ago. He was in a chorus line. He's a dancer. He played Gilbert Grape in Anna Green Gables out in Gananoque. Recently, he played the most fabulous hairbrush in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert in the St. Jacob's Country Playhouse. Like the paintbrush dance. It was so good. It sticks in my memory. So he's a dancer and he's a singer and he's an actor and he's very talented and he's very wonderful. And we're very blessed to have him. He works at a sub shop currently, and kind of manages it and runs it. He's the only other guy there other than the two chefs who make the fabulous sandwiches. But we're very blessed that he comes back to us. His partner Shane and he are engaged, and they both work. So Shane currently does a lot of the management at the Rabbit, and Connor is currently really tackling the world at Somewhere. And so he's home, obviously, because there's no theater jobs, there's no acting jobs. And so when I pitched this idea to him, he was like, "Ha! Like absolutely, of course! Like this is great." And so we filmed like 100% of it on the green screen. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's all the movie magic that Zach creates. But his singing voice and his talent. And if you haven't watched the video multiple times, go back and watch it just one time where all you do is watch his face, particularly when he's not singing.
I mean, I do that. I think I was focused on you. You were doing a lot of reacting,
right?
too.
Well, and that's what's great. So when I'm singing, like they're like, mm-hmm. Where he like, suddenly like looks off at something that he's just imagined in his own mind, and it's so genius.
Oh, there's a sparkle in his eye that's just so engaging. He pulls you right in.
And like, because you're hot off the success of these videos, right? These are still booming out there, getting lots of hits.
I know, 50,000 views on the first one, which is, I guess, a bit more than I expected. Although, always fun when something goes viral. I've never had anything go viral previously.
How is that happening? Like,
it's just Facebook. We just posted it once to Facebook, and it just went.
Yeah, so the whole viral thing. Marshall's an analog man in a digital world. Doesn't do the social medias and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Neither does his family, and they're smarter for it.
So you don't actually exist then?
No
social profiles.
No.
Means you're not real.
No phone.
No phone. You have a cellular device, like a mobile.
Is it
phone.
a Nokia?
I don't know what it is.
Motorola?
It's from 7-Eleven, and my daughters can get me on it when they're at school, and that's it.
When school was a thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I wish some days. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the viral thing is just, it just happens. So it's like COVID. You put something out there and it catches fire and you have no control over it, even if it's something that you don't want people to see.
Yeah, often actually, if you don't want people to see it, that's when it goes viral.
Yeah.
We did a touch of research. There's certain days of the week that are better, certain times of the day that are better, because lots of people look at their social medias, like the internets.
Socials.
When their socials when they're at work, which of course every boss out there should know, but is probably sad about. So early
Wednesday still the hot day. Wednesday,
well, it's
10 a.m.
early in the week, early morning is ideal because then it gets action on. So if you did it Monday or Tuesday, then it gets action on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as people are getting to work and cracking open their social media profiles and scrolling instead of doing their work. So we just, we were sitting on the back deck drinking rosé. Again, I'm working a lot less than I normally do. I used to work, between 60 and 80 hours a week pretty well consistently for 10 years. So I think I'm a bit due for a break, which is kind of nice. But we've been spending some time sitting on the back deck drinking rosé. And I started riffing, just like riffing on funny COVID lines from random Disney. We started with Sound of Music, just because we had recently watched.
Tell me you were in like the high on the mountain alone we go down.
Right? I mean, that's actually, we didn't do that one. It was like 16 going on 17.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it just kind of started, little bits and pieces started to come together. And then when it really came together was when kind of a concept for the song. So it's easy to do one or two lines, but what needed to kind of happen was that the song needed a direction, as it were. So when the first one, like Part of Your World, I came up with this line like, I want to make a reservation.
It was awesome.
And I was like, oh, I'm like, that's what the song is about. Mm-hmm. The song is about longing to eat in at restaurants because that's what I do. So it's obviously very relevant. And it wrote itself. After it had a concept, after it had a direction, it just onto the page, everything came out. It took almost no time to write it.
Did you have that fun songwriting moment where it's all coming together and you're like, oh my God, yeah. I'm a genius. I'm a genius.
So
I'm doing a pen. You're typing. We're doing air songwriting at the moment. I love that feeling where you're like, oh my, everyone needs to see this.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the rest, and then they started coming, right? So then A Whole New World was next and is the most recently released one, which is a COVID world, of course. And it also seemed sensible that this is this brand new, exciting, terrifying world that we're facing, particularly again in restaurants. So they're all restaurant related because, as much as places open and different things are viable now again, and maybe won't be again in the future in the world of COVID, when it comes to restaurants, we're literally inviting you into our space to shove things inside your mouth and then give them back to us to wash. Mm-hmm. And if mouth transmission is where the pandemic finds its path, then we're really putting ourselves in kind of an extra risk.
It's like it's a frontline job. Am I wrong in saying that?
Well, but it's a unique frontline job, right? You go to the grocery store, but you don't lick anything.
Hopefully not.
Right?
There are videos out there, I'm sure.
Well, but this is the thing. You're literally coming into our space to lick the forks and knives and put your mouth onto the cup and then hand it to someone who has to go and dishwash, right?
Yeah.
And the dishwashing area is the part that nobody talks about, nobody thinks about, nobody says, oh, you know that spray hose that you spray all of the foodstuffs off and it splashes back in your face? What is that guy doing? How is he not getting the COVID? Because every single plate, fork, cup, etc. comes past him and he has to put a high volume spray at it that inevitably, I mean, we used to call, someone used to call their dishwasher Swamp Donkey.
Oh, yeah.
Not us, because that would be rude. But that was a name, and it was because it was so swampy in the dish pit. Like, it was so wet.
And it's a hot job, too, right? This guy's not, or gal is not going to be in a hazmat suit with a face shield.
Well, and even if you have a face shield, like, a lot of the spray back comes from below. So
right.
You'd have to be like you'd have to wear a space suit. Like, you'd have to be in a hazmat suit to make it viable.
What are places doing for this?
Well, I don't think anyone's talking about it.
Right. It's not in the 100-page document that you probably got.
No, they're like, tables must be 6 feet apart. Not the people sitting at the tables, just the table corner to corner. So if you've got a 200-pound dude sitting in the chair between this table and that table, there's only 6 feet in between. Now there's really only like 1.5 feet between those two dudes. But nobody's talking about that either. And so for us, we're worker owned, so we get to make a lot of our own decisions.
Which is great, yeah.
It's amazing. We don't have, investors that are like, make more money. Don't lose your shirts. Don't spend last year's profits. We're just like, last year's profits are this week's paycheck, and so we just kind of are rolling it back in. But that's a luxury that a lot of places don't have. There's a lot of pressures to reopen. And so I think these are things that aren't being talked about because, quite frankly, we don't want to talk about them.
Right.
Like, it's terrifying. We ask, I'm like, who washes the dishes? Everybody's like, oh, we're just going to use single-use plastics. Like, like this horrible thing that, like, if it was 6 months ago, people would be like, you use straws? I'm so offended. And now it's like, oh, no, you should be using single-use plastics for everything. I'm like, I'm so confused.
That's a good theme. Like, me and Marshall talk about this a lot. We're very confused.
Yeah,
all the time about
what
we're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing.
I love the idea of a podcast where we're talking about things that nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
That's my whole life. I'm eternally just like causing trouble and like poking into areas where people are uncomfortable and asking them questions that they don't want to answer, and they just like stare at me.
Isn't that exactly what everybody's kind of realizing they need to do right now, is ask those uncomfortable questions, poke the people that don't want to be poked? That's all I'm really seeing and hearing. And that's where my comfort lies, because if I'm not saying exactly what's happening and asking somebody to say exactly what's happening with them, then I think there's really no point to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, what is interesting, in the broader spectrum of our world is that it is happening. It's starting to happen where people are poking and people are asking the questions, but it's not normal, which is what we're seeing and why we're seeing the blowback and the uncomfortability. We can talk about, there's so many things we could talk about, but like the blowback of white fragility and like the blowback of all of these kinds of topics of people being like, well, you can't make me wear a mask. You can't make me do this, because we're actually not, as much as like you might do it. There might be some individuals who poke into those uncomfortable places. I definitely do it. I'm known as an upstart and a troublemaker, probably in my entire city. Anyone who listens to this from Stratford is gonna be like, oh yeah, she likes to cause trouble. But the majority of people don't. The majority of people like it better when we don't talk about these things. They like it better when we don't take the issues head on. And so I think it's an uncomfortable time for everybody. And I think that even though we should be asking these questions, particularly like in restaurants, what restaurant wants to go to a health board and be like, so I don't think you should let us open. We're going to lose our houses, our shirts, and our entire businesses. But, what about the dish pit? So you don't bring it up. You're like, maybe they won't ask. Which is terrifying. It's
terrifying, and also putting people at risk, and you don't want to put your employees at risk, especially when it seems like most of your places are employee owned, or
yeah, we're all completely employee owned.
So just like you say, in a COVID world, you're protecting each other the best that you can, and then trying to protect the customer at the same time. I did like how I saw online that you guys were rolling with some changes, right? You're doing some grocery ordering, grocery delivery service.
Well, yeah, we've reinvented our concepts, 4 or 5 times over at each property. We reinvent, every week, every other day. Like, what are we doing this week? I don't know. Like, oh, they open patios. We don't have patios. How do we get people in? Guess we don't. I guess we're going to have a big staff lunch today. But we have a diner that has pivoted into, it originally pivoted into more traditional grocery. So it did fresh produce and pasta sauce and like those kinds of things, very basic staples. And then as COVID has gone along and as more restrictions have lifted and people are more comfortable going back to grocery stores, we saw that kind of taper off, and we kind of repositioned it again into more of like Steve's our head chef there. He's making dumplings, and he's making lasagnas, and he's making more of like ready-made things, which have taken off and become kind of more the backbone of that program. And then we ebb and flow on different like hot takeout as well, which has kind of gone up and down throughout that entire time. But breakfast is a funny thing for takeout, right? It's not, diners are kind of built on their quick in, quick out, scenario. And then the Red Rabbit, which is our flagship restaurant, is really, it's fully about dining in. It's fully about the banter with the service team and the feeling that you get when our team is working together and the food is coming out beautifully presented and prepared by chefs that care about it more than anyone probably should. And the artistry of that and cramming that into a box and a bag is a heck of a thing, and it's not, in some ways, it's really not fair for the chefs to have to do that because they're very talented and they have a ton of passion. And I watch them plate lovingly into like a 9-inch container, and it's round and it's like a plate, and you watch them and you watch Courtney like with her tongs like placing the spätzle just ever so gently and pouring the sauce on top, and I'm like, oh girl,
by the time that gets to the diner, yeah.
And then like that very plate is of course the one that like somebody complains about that day. They're like, I felt like the presentation was not as good as I would expect from the Red Rabbit.
Presentation of my takeout pandemic food,
like, girl,
made by a professional chef.
I'm like, you drove it to Kitchener.
Yeah.
You just admitted you drove something 45 minutes packed in a foil container. What do you think it's going to look like on the other side of that? Like, I Lord love you. If you had seen Courtney try to make it beautiful and then called me and said, that was not pretty, you would hate yourself. You would know that you had made an error in regards to the effort that someone had tried to put into it. So that one's been a bit weird, and it ebbs and flows. We do a chef's choice, which is like a surprise, which is, I think, really helpful in COVID because everybody is cooking every day. And deciding every day, even if it is takeout, is sometimes a pain in the butt. So it was kind of nice, particularly at the very beginning of COVID, we just offered, just let the chef cook for you. And people would be like, what is it? We're like, a trained chef is going to make you dinner. If you have any allergies or restrictions, let us know. But he's going to make you dinner. And people would be like, oh, that sounds nice. You know, and so they played up a 3-course dinner and it would go sent out in the box for $30. You know, but that's not what we're used to.
No, it actually just reminded me of a conversation I had with my husband, Steve, which was like, I love being home. I'm sorry and sad and scared that there's a pandemic, but I love working from home and being around my husband and my kids. We can ask them how they feel on a different show. But I just adore it. And it's been a real godsend for me. But I can see on Steve's face some days when I'm like, what should we make for dinner? Do we need to like pull something out of the freezer or whatever? And like, I'm pushing some buttons here. And I did say to him the one day, what do you want to have for dinner? And he's like, I don't know, man. I thought, I won't be asking that question anymore for a little while because it's exhausting with the repetition, with the Groundhog Day of it all, right?
I think that's, I mean, we experienced that in our home. And it's
Yeah?
like just the other night. Zach's like, I'm sorry, I got mad. It's like... You know, and the mad is very mild, but again, it's like come on, like what are we gonna have? And I'm like, we back and forth. We both, I mean, that statement could have been coming from either of us because we just don't know. It's like, well, is such and such open? It's like, no, it's Monday. You know, and back and forth we go with each other, and it's like, okay, pizza.
Yeah, we've done that a few times. I actually one night had a bowl of lettuce with dressing because I'm like, I can't.
You have fresh lettuce in your house?
We do.
No, I just like fresh things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I had pita pit today.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, it's
Justina's friends might have made it for you.
Take for granted. Well, Sylvia went and got it for me because she went to the PetSmart in the same plaza.
Sylvia's the best wife.
And Sylvia said somebody came in like while she was ordering saying, my it fell apart. My pita fell apart.
Pitas
She's
fell
making
apart.
a huge deal about how my mother can't eat this. My pita fell apart.
use
Anyways.
a fork.
Fork and knife. That's what I was thinking.
Or your hands and then just wash them. You're washing them anyways every 10 minutes, right?
Hopefully.
I guess that's what people in TV shows say. I don't want a booth near the kitchen or a table near the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
Is it? I thought it was the bathroom. Nobody wants to sit near the bathroom. I'm like, I pee a lot. This is good for me.
Yeah, people don't. I mean, you can cut this part out. You can put it in wherever you want. It's so funny.
You can take this part and put it wherever you want.
Wherever you want. The number of opinions that people have on where they want to sit in restaurants, I can't even tell you. You can literally be taking somebody shows up and it's a relatively quiet night and you're taking them to what you consider one of the top 2 or 3 restaurant or tables in the restaurant. And you believe that very strongly because that's what you do. Just so you know, when you walk into a restaurant, the first few tables you seat are the best tables. They're the best tables for view from the street. They're the best tables for the guest experience because that's how you seat a restaurant. You fill the best tables first so that they come available first again. You get to seat them again. Nobody in the restaurant business is trying to put you in a place you don't want to go. But I can't tell you that everyone's just like, I don't want to sit there.
I've never asked for another table.
I'm like,
Not once.
And just so you know, to all the world out there, again, feel free to cut this out. But the minute you ask to sit somewhere else, you're an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Just like that's period.
Jessie, when I knew you were going to be on the show, the first thing that crossed my mind is how I feel like before COVID-19, I've always thought opening one restaurant
No kidding.
must be one of the most complicated things you could ever venture into. So much so that it has never crossed my mind. Even we're vegetarian, and once in a while the kids say, "Dad, wouldn't it be neat to open a vegetarian restaurant?" I go, "No, never." Like, not that I feel it like some vegetarian restaurants do make it, but I mean, just the thought of a restaurant, it just seems so complicated.
It's 100%. It's actually really nice and refreshing to hear someone have that opinion. I can't
Do you
tell
get
you
that people are like, oh, yeah, it must be nice to just own a restaurant?
Honey, there is a
5.
reason that restaurants have an 80% fail rate.
Yeah.
And it's because everybody that throws a good dinner party thinks they should open a restaurant. Like your kids. Okay, Dad, let's open a restaurant. You can work 97 hours a week and have a 20% waste cost and end up with a 2% margin. That sounds like fun. But nobody knows. Nobody knows what it's actually like. You think that because you make a good roast and you really enjoy having 10 people over to eat the same thing for dinner with you, that you're going to be able to execute the long hours and the grueling lifestyle of restaurants. I call it a crime of passion. I actually don't know why I like restaurants. I do. Like they're like it's in my blood. Like I can't, like I love them. I love building them. I love creating them and watching them move. It's less exciting now because there's no people. But yeah, when I opened a restaurant back in 2012 was the first restaurant that I opened that I don't own. And it was a horrifying disaster. My business partners at the time took advantage of my unknown but apparent skill at the time and really just screwed us real bad. And so out of that, everything was kind of crumbling and falling apart. And I'm naturally the kind of person that doesn't go down without a fight, as it were. So I kind of said to the group of people that had been working together, so it was a bunch of us that, really talented chef teams, really talented front of house team, and we all had worked together at that property for just shy of 3 years. And I was like, who's sick of doing this for everybody else? Like, we're good at this. We've obviously shown we're good at this because they're screwing us because we made a bunch of money. If we'd been really unsuccessful, they wouldn't have been able to take advantage of it. So why don't we just throw our money into a hat, max out our credit cards and our lines of credit, and see how much money we can get together, and all go and beat a banker into submission somehow, because banks hate hospitality, if anybody knows about lending and traditional bankers. And we did. We raised $100,000, which is crazy, between 9 people. And it was love money. It was money that was literally pulled off credit cards and out of line of credits and cash advances, and just, begged and borrowed as, birthday money from our grandparents and thrown into a hat. And we did end up bludgeoning a banker into submission somehow and got another $250,000 and just plunked a restaurant into a bridal shop, which also is a thing I don't recommend. There's a reason that restaurants go into places that were previously restaurants.
I'm thinking flooring and change rooms, and there's probably carpet in a bridal shop.
The vent hoods, NFPA 96.
Oh.
It's a term that I learned about 5 years ago that I know way too much about the trajectories of air returns and all these kinds of things, access to open windows and distance from the edge of the building, and all these kinds of technical things that you have to pay someone $15,000 to put just the plans together for. So we built this restaurant out of nothing. And you know what? We were crazy. You're right. If anyone ever tells you, I think I might open a restaurant, be like, unless you've worked in one for at least 10 years, just don't. Just period. Don't bother. Because it's terrifying, and it has a massive failure rate because of those kinds of things. I always say to people, if you're gonna open a restaurant, if you think if your kids are hey, and you're yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. I'm a great cook. I love throwing a dinner party. There's 2 things I think that everybody should do. The first is to actually throw a dinner party, but you need a menu of at least 5 appetizers and 5 mains. You have to invite at least 12 people, and you have to execute all of the plates, whatever they order, without pre-advance notice at the same time. So that's the first key, is trying to make all of that happen and everything come together in the pans at the right moment.
And you have to invite some of those friends that are unruly, maybe.
And ones that have dietary issues.
I'm one of those, so
Right?
I know who I am when I have to order, and
perfect.
I apologize.
Well, and that's the
and
thing.
I will take what I can get.
Yeah.
I will not complain.
That's all we ask for, right? And it's once you've done that, so if you've executed that and you had a good time and everything came out okay and you didn't really burn anything and you didn't have to throw everything away, and you had everything that people ordered, because you had to have the right sales mix of all 5 items for even though there's 12 people, and you had to make sure that you had kind of guesstimated how much without wasting too much food. After you do that, then the next step to see if you're really, really ready, and this is the best, most fun part, is you go to Costco and you buy yourself a flat of craft dinner. And I mean the full-size flat. I'm looking for about 1,000 boxes. And then you have to spend 3 days in front of your stove, cooking the craft dinner, tasting the craft dinner, and throwing the craft dinner in the garbage on repeat for 14 hours in front of your stove for 3 days in a row. At the end of those 3 days...
I haven't even thought about that part.
Right? If at the end of the 3 days, you've realized that any dish, no matter how passionate you were about it, by the 1,000th time you've made it, is the most irritating thing you've ever made. And dear God, you just want to change the menu, but you can't because half of your guests are no, the fusilli, it's my favorite. Then you are not cut out for the restaurant business, particularly not in the back of house. Because no matter how passionate you are about that empanada that you just made and that you rolled by hand and you made 27 of them today, and then you realize by the end of next week you've made 4,027 of them, and you're I hate my life. Then you're just not ready to be a chef, because the monotony and the constant just slagging it out day in and day out in 50-degree heat with a 5-minute break every 7 hours, you're just not cut out for the restaurant business. And that's the part that people miss, is that kind of ruling side of restaurants. Everybody thinks it's fun and throwing a dinner party.
And you're sort of milling about, seating friends and drinking a glass of wine.
Right?
It's not what it's about.
I think you get a glimpse of it sometimes as a customer. Every once in a while, near the kitchen, or you can just feel something. I'm not just talking about an employee with a poor attitude who'd rather hang out behind the bar and talk rather than come out. I'm talking about you can just get a little glimpse of it sometimes of how hard it can be.
If you're paying attention. And I think one of the things about restaurants and what's fun to talk about them and to talk about them either on a podcast or with other people is that it's something that almost everybody can relate to in some way. Either you go to restaurants or you work in them. Like almost nobody doesn't attend restaurants in some way, whether it's fast food or sit down or something in between. So there's always kind of that connection. And guests, particularly guests that are regulars at restaurants, particularly, a particular restaurant, they get kind of into the lifestyle and the culture, and they feel like they're a part of it. And some guests actually are, and some think they are. And so there's different varying degrees of that. But that's what's kind of neat about restaurants when you talk about them, because everybody feels like they own a little piece of that experience, right?
I want to hear about your restaurants. Can you kind of take us through them?
I could talk for days. I mean, I love them. So like I said, it's a crime of passion. It's something I'm really into, and it's something I just kind of stumbled into when I was in my late teens. I wandered into a restaurant thinking I was going to be a server, because everybody wants to be a rock star, right? Everybody wants to start off as a bartender or a server. And I was told that I could be a busboy. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I'll move up. I'll make things happen. And I did. And I went from being a bus person into expediting, and then into junior serving, and then full serving. And this was in a 4-diamond restaurant. And so I started off in really, really high-end dining in my early years. But the restaurants that we've created, so, I can kind of just give you a rundown of how it happened. So 5 years ago, this whole crazy disaster happened. And then from that disaster, we were like, hey, let's make something really cool. So we opened the Red Rabbit, which is our flagship restaurant. It's very chef-driven. It's very much focused on what they create and what they're capable of creating with great product and great produce. So they have kind of free reign for the most part. What has happened to us is we designed this really great fried chicken right at the beginning. So that has always been on the menu. And I feel like if we take it off the menu, even in the COVID times, there would be some sort of mutiny. So it's the kind of thread that connects every menu that we do. And but the menu can change into just about anything. And we execute in a regular summer season. So because Stratford is seasonal and is dependent on the festival, we do 3 menus every day, which is insanity. We used to do 4. But we do a lunch menu that's very kind of accessible. It has things like mac and cheese. It has fried chicken and waffles. It has burgers. It has like pastrami sandwiches, those kinds of things. Very small, like usually 10-item menus, because everything, again, is made like 100% from scratch. And then we used to do a pre-theater menu. So Stratford is theater focused. And from 5 until 7, the entire city sits to eat. So we did a prefix. So it would be 3 courses. It usually ranged in around between $50 and $60. Appetizer, main course, and dessert. And it was designed to get people in and out to the show. A lot of restaurants in Stratford do that in the peak of the season. We would do it very seasonally. So 5 apps, 5 mains, and you would feed 60 people in an hour and a half. And then get them off to the show. And then after that, we would kind of do a hybrid menu. We've really kind of created our own style in that you don't get a plate of food. Everything is serviced kind of family style. So our kitchen has a big stack of these big boards, locally made, and basically you order from a menu a selection of different things, and they all get kind of jammed onto the board for the table, and the board drops in front of everybody, and it's this big, gorgeous kind of feast. People say, is it like small plates? No, it's a giant stack of food done usually as one course. There's no like apps and mains on that last menu. It's our most popular menu. And it's just kind of this beautiful spread of all these amazing things that the chefs have created. So that's really where we began. And
that's Red Rabbit.
That's Red Rabbit. Yep. And so that's kind of, I call it like the flagship, because it really is the one that has gotten, it's the one that's been around the longest. It is arguably, I'm biased, but I would say even in an unbiased position, it's arguably one of the best restaurants in the city and has become so relatively quickly.
And the exterior is beautiful. It looks like it could be in a movie, not just a co-video, but
Right?
no, the outside's gorgeous.
It was in a CJ Walker, the Netflix series.
Oh, wow.
It was actually for a half a second in the beginning of that. That's been going for 5 years. We have a pretty strong crew. Our kitchen team and our front of house team have basically been there for 5 years, which is also very unusual in the restaurant business. It helps that there's worker ownership and that kind of concept that we've designed. It's not a co-op. It's a weird hybrid of capitalism and socialism kind of jammed together to take care of the people while still making money. And it seems to work okay. Then about 3 years ago? 3 years ago, I actually went through a very kind of traumatic personal experience. My ex-husband and I parted ways very violently. It was a really unfortunate time. And at that time, I needed out of the rabbit without leaving the rabbit. And so my best friend and I kind of decided we were going to open a bar. She'd kind of left the restaurant business. She was involved in the rabbit, but she'd gone in to do some other work. And because she always really loved bartending. She didn't love serving as much as she liked kind of being behind the wood and designing the cocktails and that kind of thing. So we decided we were going to basically make a lady bar. Like, we're going to make this schwank, sexy, cute, sparkly thing. And she was going to make cocktails. And so 3 years ago, we opened Okazu, which a lot of the team, particularly the boys on the team at the Rabbit, thought was too fast. And we were like, whatever, it's time. So very much in contrast to the Rabbit. The Rabbit is very neutral tones with kind of red splashes and lots of industrial lighting and things like that. Kind of very clean, again, letting the chef's food kind of speak. And Okazu was deep teals and rich golds and lots of filigree and sparkly bits and all these kinds of things. And Brittany made these fabulous cocktails, and we did, kind of snacky bites, but the food was never the focus. It was she's basically a bar chef. And so that became kind of our late night spot. So we would do lunch, dinner, and then post-theater till 9 at the Rabbit. And then Okazu was open kind of 5 p.m. until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and was very sassy. And kind of, it's where I ended up gravitating for probably a year or more. We tried to put in other general managers at the Rabbit, never really stuck. They'd come and they go. It's a hard team to work with because they're so tight-knit and they feel like they know their job so well, which they do.
It's hard to crack into that family.
And it's hard to manage them.
Oh, for sure.
Trying to hire someone above those types is just constant headbutting.
I can imagine that their consensus is always you're new here. You can't.
Yeah, right? What do you know?
Yeah.
And then you'd get, every once in a while, you'd get somebody who was snarky and be like, well, I'm an owner. And it's no, that's not how that's supposed to work. So Okazu and the Rabbit ran kind of for a year, and my timeline started to accelerate. So it was 2 years to the next one. And then 18 months later, a situation had come up that there was a restaurant that someone had renovated, and they'd kind of tried to start it, and it didn't go well. And the contractors who had done the work were our contractors for the previous two situations. And they came to me and they said, listen, you want to run a restaurant? And I'm like, oh, it's been 16 months since the last one. I don't know that I'm ready. And they were like, oh, it's a really good deal. And we sat down and we kind of worked at a deal that worked for them because they basically owned it at that stage because of how it had not gone well, 80% fail rate, as we discussed earlier. We kind of decided that I could put a concept in there. And I guess kind of what I consider my gift in restaurants is knowing what a space should be. So, the bridal shop obviously gave us nothing. We plunked something into it that we wanted to. Okazu previously had been a sandwich shop, and I felt like it really didn't make sense. And so it was long and dark, and, so we turned it into this sexy cocktail bar. And then this other space had been set up as a kind of a barbecue joint, and it was very, very bright and light and big windows. And I was like, oh, no, this is a diner. This is a breakfast joint. And so we did that. So it was about 18 months. So the first one was 2 years, and then 18 months later, we opened a diner. And that was just silliness.
And that's Old Man and Son?
That's Old Man and Son, yeah. And so it's very kind of classic diner, but not a lot of diners these days, Lord love them, are Cisco diners, as I would call them. So what they're doing is Cisco basically creates you can build a restaurant off of Cisco product. Cisco will basically deliver you everything ready to go, and you either drop it into a deep fryer or put it onto a flat top. We do things like smoke our own bacon, smoke our own brisket. You know, we buy Downey Street Bakehouse sourdough bread and things like that. So it leans a bit more artisanal, a bit more like real food diner, as opposed to being kind of more of the prefab product you find in a lot of places, particularly where our meats are concerned. We use Perth pork for our meat products, and it's just a little bit more wholesome. I'm using air quotes here. You can't see me.
We have a noise for those.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
And so then, what was it? Like just shy of a year after that, as you can see, the timeline is like picking up. Timeline keeps moving faster and faster. So we'd always kind of, as I mentioned earlier, the fried chicken. So the fried chicken was the thread that has held the Red Rabbit menu to a certain standard all the way along. So people always wanted the fried chicken. They want the fried chicken all the time and in larger quantities and for a lesser price, because the Rabbit is, I mean, I think it's like $8.25 or $8.75 a piece. And you can, of course, get a bucket of KFC for like 17 cents. It's terrifying. I don't know where they get their chickens. Nobody knows where they get their chickens for
Home
that
foster
price.
programs.
I can't, right? Like, I see the back end pricing. Like, I know what kind of price you can buy chicken for. I don't know where they get their chickens. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that lie. I have questions.
Well, since we're talking about that, I want to ask you about cocktails.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get back to Old Man. So is drinks in restaurants, is that really where things work well in terms of...
Does for me.
Margin.
Yeah, like, so I know how much a bottle of whiskey costs.
Right.
And I know how much, like, buy a whiskey sour costs.
Right.
So is this something that works really well from a business standpoint?
I mean, alcohol is where the margin is.
Yeah.
Food margin is really tough. It's better if you have better staff, because you can avoid waste, which can be a huge loss. The good thing about booze is that it doesn't go bad, right?
100%. I'll be like, this salad's expensive. When I'm personally looking at something, I'll be like, a glass of wine for $12? No problem.
Right? Exactly.
Let's get two.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? Is our perception of value, particularly in our food source. I mean, that could be a whole other podcast. We could talk about like food security, and we could talk, like we could have an entire conversation about the supply chain and how it has broken down in COVID and how it's rebounding and where we're going to have to go to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. And anyways, we could talk, like I said, I could talk to you guys for days about all kinds of topics. But cocktails are where the margin is, because like you said, people are happier to pay a markup for whatever reason. Like if you try to charge $14 for an appetizer, people are like, I don't know. I know that you made that risotto by hand and then rolled it into tiny balls and used an artisan cheese in the center and then rolled it in panko and then fried it to order and then hand-picked these greens with Vestal virgins in some sort of organic field.
Yeah.
But like $8.95 is my top price for an appetizer. Ooh, $16 cocktail. I am in. You know,
Guilty.
If I don't have an appetizer, I could have two cocktails. So yeah, I mean, it really does make a difference. Now, I mean, if you knew anything about like booze pricing south of the border versus our booze pricing,
Totally.
like we live in prohibition still. Like Ontario liquor laws are horrifying. Also, your bartender is 100% responsible for you. It's the only crime you can commit is like getting completely drunk and wasted and having somebody else be responsible for you still in Ontario, because your bartender is responsible for how drunk you get.
Yeah, that's kind of across the board now, because Ford's through that sneaky lie, and that
Right?
if you get drunk, you can rape somebody and it's A-okay.
Right?
So rapists just get drunk first.
It's your bartender that's responsible for you. That's how it's like when you go through smart serve training. It's like, no, you got to make sure that you don't, like, there's a case right now, and I know the bar specifically that it is, but a guy had a few drinks at this bar. He went out and he killed someone with his truck on purpose, like ran them down because he hated him for some reason and nobody knows why. And the bar and the bartender are getting sued.
Crazy.
Like, I'm like, how is that a thing? I'm like, did you breathalyze him? Do you even know if he was intoxicated? They're like, no. I'm like, what? How is that? Like, anyways, thankfully it's not one of ours, but dear God in heaven, those are the kind of things that are nightmares. But yeah, so booze is really, it's definitely an added margin, right? And particularly if you have access to like wine and things like that the general populace can't get. So if you can import wine from specific wineries, things like that, your markup on it can be significantly higher than it can in if you were to buy something off of an LCBO generalist shelf, right? There's always kind of markups for restaurants are basically 300%. It's always kind of, it's one time for the cost of the product, one time for the cost of the staff to serve it, and one time for the cost of the like lights to be on and for the table for you to sit at. And people always think, oh, the markup's so high. And it's like, it's really not. Our margins are like 2%. You know, when you pay $8 for an appetizer, so 2% would be 16 cents. So when you buy an $8 appetizer, we make 16 cents.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Okay.
It's
I'll
crazy.
buy more appetizers.
No, buy more booze. We love it when you buy more booze. Liquid lunches are great. So yeah, and cocktails in particular, because you can be really creative with the other things that get added to it. Although 100% honest, like the cost of the booze, like the cost of the whiskey is sometimes less than the cost of the lime juice.
Right.
And that's the thing that people don't think about. In the States, booze is like 1/10 the price.
I think this is why, I mean, we've been going to Florida, my family, for like 25 years every winter. I think last year was probably our last year. Honest to God, it's burning from the ground up. But yeah, so I'll order a beer at a restaurant and they bring two. And I'm like, no, I ordered one. I just need just one beer for me, thanks. You know, like, got to walk back to the hotel. You know, they're like, no, it's happy hour. It's always happy hour. Yeah. And if you order a margarita or a glass of wine, it doesn't matter. You're getting two, and it's full to the top.
It's crazy, and their
and
prices,
it's like $2.
Yeah, and their prices are just so much lower than even for the same product. So like you buy a 40 of Smirnoff in Ontario, it's $40, basically $1 an ounce, give or take. If you buy a 40 in Florida or Michigan, it's like $9. It's just there's no comparison. Restaurants are crazy, as I've said. Like it really is a crime of passion. I don't, as much as I recommend people do it if they love it, by golly, you know, definitely weigh your options before you dive in,
or do the math, or go to Conestoga College for the hospitality program,
or go work in one. Just go work in one and really see it. And if you decide that you want to be a manager, and after you've been a manager for 5 years, you still want to open a restaurant, then open a restaurant. So the timeline is accelerating. So we did 5 years ago, then 3 years ago. So 2 years later, we did the second restaurant, and then 18 months later, we did the next restaurant, which was Old Man and Son. And then, so we decided that, the timeline's accelerating, and these aren't things that I'm seeking out. Just to be clear, I don't go out and like, where can
I'm bored.
I'm bored.
Yeah.
I mean, that does happen also. And I have had 6 business plans in my folder since 2016. So when we first did the Rabbit, I built all of the business plans of like the empire that I would like to own as a restaurateur. So I had these concepts in place. And like I said, I find that when I find a place, I know what goes in there. I'm not going to just try to ram one of my concepts into something that doesn't work. So a woman that I know had this little French fry shop in Stratford, and she literally just cold called me. It's like 8:47. I roll over and it's like Sue's on the phone. I'm like, oh God, what's happening? I'm half asleep. I'm like, hello. And she's like, I'm done. You guys should buy my restaurant. I'm like, oh, just like that.
Not again.
She's like, I know you want to do a fried chicken shack. It'd be perfect for your fried chicken shack. Because, I mean, she's a friend of mine. We've talked about the fried chicken shack how many times over the last however many years where we've been having dinners together. And I'm like, you're right. You're not wrong. Okay. I said, I need to go back to bed. Let's talk about this later. So basically the next day or within the next week, we're back chatting about it. And, she says, you really should buy this. It's, you know, here's the details. And I go through and I do a quick cash flow. And I'm like, oh, you're probably not wrong. Like this, it's one of the lowest lease prices, I think, in the city of Stratford, which is what's really attractive about it. It's like unreasonably low. It's basically free. So it's like, why wouldn't you? And then I kind of ran the idea past a bunch of people. And even the naysayers who usually are like, you're moving too fast. We're like, oh yeah, fried chicken is a good idea. I guess we shouldn't we? And I was like,
always going to be a market for it.
Right?
Yeah.
And we had some concerns. The cash flow projections I did on it were relatively conservative because our chicken is more expensive. Like I said, you can get a 12-piece bucket at KFC for $17. Our 8-piece bucket is like $42. So it's you pay for the real product. One of the things about our chicken, it's boneless. It is all thighs, so it's all dark meat. People keep calling us and saying, can we do white meat? And we're like, oh, just come to the dark side. It's fine. You're going to be fine. And you'd be amazed at how many people get there. They're like, they're resistant for weeks and weeks. And finally they try it and they're like, I was really surprised. It was really good. So we buttermilk brine our chicken for a minimum of 24 hours. And that makes a huge difference to how delicious and juicy and wonderful and tasty it is. And then it's double dredged and hand fried to order. So it's literally like incredibly fresh. And so we fired that open basically 5 seconds before COVID hit. And it was a really big season. So we actually had 3 moves with our restaurant. We had set up a chessboard where 3 things were supposed to fall together this season. It was supposed to be a really big season in Stratford, like the biggest I'd ever seen. They just built $100 million Tom Patterson Theater. Like it was going to be gangbusters. It was the time to expand.
And people needed to eat.
So we had queued up a number of things, which I'll get into in a hot second. So we opened this fried chicken shack on February 29th.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Right? Our very first, so we did this soft launch and Zach did a video of it and it's insane. It's like a stop motion video and it's just like packed. Like the people, if you were to show this video to someone now in COVID, they'd be like, oh my God, it's terrifying. It's not okay. And I
can't even watch a movie with peace anymore.
I'm like, people are
you're too close together.
Don't touch.
Wait, do you know her? Don't touch her like that.
There's like a kissing booth in a movie the other day. I was like, don't. It
Droplets.
Transmits via your mouth. But so we opened this fried chicken shack in the middle of this madness, which all things considered ended up being a really great move because it was for takeout.
Yeah, great.
So we did this first day where we sold like 160 sandwiches in like 6 minutes. It was really dumb, and I was frying French fries. The Beacon Herald put a picture of my tatas frying French fries in the paper. They didn't get my face. It was just, right in that midsection there.
Yeah.
Sex sells, always does. And we launched this fried chicken shack, and my projections were like, we're doing double what my projections were. It's silly. It's really silly. I mean, we're very thankful because it's basically bankrolling everything else we're doing right now. And we would basically be bankrupt if we hadn't opened this bizarre little fried chicken shack in a 500 square foot hot box, which in this heat wave, I would like to send a massive shout out to Scott and Mike and Jaden, who without complaint, I don't even understand it. I go in there for 3 minutes and I am like, this is gross. It's so hot. I can't. How do you survive like this? Someone should put an air conditioner in. That's me. And they're just like, no, it's cool. Everything's fine. And I'm like, you guys do 8 hours in this hot box of like 40 degrees slinging fried chicken for really happy people who get to go back to their air conditioned homes and eat it. And I don't even know how you survive. And they do it without complaint. And I love them for it. It's so wonderful. But so that was number 4. And so simultaneously, in this crazy season, this big 2020 season, everything was here for Stratford. It's going to be so good. So we had done 3 things. So we were going to open the fried chicken shack. Simultaneously, we had bought the building next to the Rabbit.
Right.
So it's commercial condo. So we hadn't bought like $1 million building. We bought like a $350,000 commercial condo, which is really great because there's not very many of them in Stratford. And we were going to move Okazu, the cocktail bar that we had in across the square, over into beside the Rabbit. So we're gonna make this nice little pair. We're gonna rebrand it as a Vec Rabbit. So it's gonna be with the Rabbit. It's gonna make a lot of cohesive sense, and they were gonna play off of each other for cocktails after dinner and moving back and forth, and everything was gonna make a ton of sense.
I want to go to there now.
And as we brought all the chandeliers, we used the same paint colors, we brought all the big drapery, like everything is sexy, and all the gold and the filigree came with it. And it's this really great pairing. So it's the front of the same building. 2 sides of the front are the Rabbit and a Vec Rabbit. And then while we were doing that, we had decided we were going to keep the space at 85 Downey, which was where Okazu was, and we were going to put in this chef's tasting counter. And it was going to be a pop-up intended for 1 year to see if it worked. And we'd brought on board these 2 incredible chefs that are chef school instructors and used to work at Rundle's, which was one of the preeminent high-end restaurants in Stratford that closed a few years ago just because they retired. And so we had all these grandiose plans. And so Avec was in the midst of renovation somewhere, as we were going to call it, somewhere a restaurant, was going to be a 12-seat chef's counter, 8 to 10 course tasting menu, $120 to $160 per head, very exclusive, very limited, like locked door, have to have entry code access, like very cool, very kind of chic and sought after, because the high-end market in Stratford is kind of dissipating because the volume of requirement for high-end is not there anymore. That's why we were only going to do 12 seats. It was all very sensible. And so we were that was our 5th restaurant. So we were opening like 4 and 5 kind of at the same time, which was a very weird juggling situation.
So 5 is on hold.
Well, so actually it's a Vec that's on hold.
Oh, okay.
So this is what's funny. So somewhere when the COVID happened, we sat down with Mike and Randy, who are these 2 very talented chefs. They're actually husband and wife, very talented duo, and they said, well, we still want to do something. And I'm like, we can't. Like, I don't think you can put an 8-course tasting menu in a box. And they're like, we've always really wanted to do a sandwich shop. I want to make submarine sandwiches.
Right. You have a sandwich shop,
right? So now we affectionately call it Subware instead of Somewhere. and so you have these two, like, 5-diamond, maybe that's exaggerated, 4-diamond, 5 diamond's really hard to get. 4-diamond, like these really amazing, talented chefs, literally sourcing every single thing from local suppliers. From the cheese, they bake their own breads, they make their own mortadella, like Mike cures capicola hams himself. Like, these guys do everything from scratch. You can't even think of something that they haven't made. They're making jardineras, and they're making their pickles, and they're like everything they do. So we're selling sandwiches for $15 that are 1 pound, that are completely local, and they're unreal.
$15 is reasonable for a giant sandwich,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's what the high-end tasting menu room became, was a sub shop.
So then on top of this, you guys decide you're gonna produce a few videos for fun. I do remember one of the first things that Zach said about you when we met was, she reminds me of Papa. That's my dad, and all the children in the family affectionately called him Papa. You ask him about something, and before you turn around, it's done. I was just at my uncle's house on the weekend. He's in our bubble, and he has a giant tree, and we were talking about a tire swing. My kids are almost too old for it. And I swear to God, I went to go and grab a drink, and I came back and my children were swinging from a tire from the tree. So I do think you have a little bit of that Braniff-itis. My maiden name is Braniff. I do think you have that. It's not an itchy soul. It's not boredom. It's just, I get an idea. I actually have the goods to execute it. And this is going to happen.
Right. Well, I attribute what I've done and kind of my execution to both of my parents, which I feel like both of my parents are very unique, and I have gotten a very blessed combination of the two. And I'm sorry, Mom, if you're listening. I hope that this is an okay way to explain it. But so my mom is an ideas lady. Mm-hmm. My mom has had more ideas in my lifetime than I can remember, for sure. And she gets a lot of ideas, and she fleshes out the idea, and it's a great idea.
That's the part, fleshing it out,
right?
Yeah.
But after she's fleshed out the idea and it's a great idea, then she's like, I have a great idea. And you're like, is it that same? No, it's a new idea. So then she goes on to the next idea. And then my dad is what I would call the closer, or the doer. So he's the one that's like, okay, we're going to get that there. That's done. Okay, what's next? Pair. Right? And she's very blessed. He's very blessed. Like they are a really good duo. But he's always the one that's just like gets it done. He's like, okay, that's done. What's next? And he doesn't have a lot of aspirations, or not that he doesn't have like creativity in that, but it's definitely not at the forefront. He's more the doer, and she's the creator. So she will imagine a thing, and then he does a thing.
How wonderful that they had you and created this
right?
maker doer.
So
thinker.
I'm like, right? So I think of the idea. I'm like, oh, that'd be fun. And then I'm like, okay, let's do that. And then I do it. Mm-hmm. But then I'm also like my dad. When I'm done, I'm like, okay, we did that. So what's next?
Mm-hmm. Well, I also love that there's an element, because a lot of times people who have all those things do not have the ability to let go. The control is so hard, right? So, but it does sound like you're able to. Zach's looking at me over here. It does sound like you're able to delegate and move back to the people that you trust, because you've hired people that you can count on.
So, kind of. It's a weird not letting go. I'm learning more about letting go the more we have. Mm-hmm. So when we just
it happens as you get older too. Yeah,
I think so too. It's interesting. So as you had mentioned before, like having one restaurant is crazy, and you're not wrong. One restaurant was harder than 3. 2 restaurants was harder than 1. So 1 is real hard. 2 is madness. 3 is great.
This is what people say about children.
Right?
Having children. After 3, they just start taking care of themselves and each other.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like when you have 1, you do everything. You wear every hat, at least for me, like so I'm the GM. I don't cook. I can, but I don't. And I don't want to. And I think I've actually really just created restaurants so I can eat at them. It's genius. Really how it boils down to. I'm like, I need a sandwich. I'm going to, like this is my whole life. But so I do kind of all of the front of house and all of the administrative and the overseeing. So when you have one, you do everything. So I ran the floor, and I did the books, and I did the administrative, and I did the scheduling, and I did everything. And then when there were two, I did both. So I would like work at the Rabbit all morning through the evening, do the dinner service, and then I would go over and close the bar. And then I would still do all the administrative and all of the scheduling and all. Like I was like, oh, and I worked like 90 hours a week, and it was insane. And then when you get three, so there's too many balls to juggle them all. And so you reach a point where, like, even if you're not good at delegating,
You have to.
you have to.
You have to
You
at that
have
point.
to. So you get to a point where you say, okay, I can't do it all now. I can't work from 7 a.m. until, although my longest shift, I think, was 39 hours. Which people say is not possible because that's more than a day. But
Yeah,
yes,
no,
I
it's
did.
possible.
I just kept working straight on through. And so you get to a point where you start to let go of things. Even if you're not good at it, you do it just out of necessity. So that's what I recommend to all the control freaks out there. Just take on too much. Take on too much so that you can't do it all. And
It's
then
actually good
eventually,
therapy.
right? You just learn. You just learn that that's not a thing you can do. And then you decide if you want to keep it all, you got to let go of something.
I'm going to switch gears. I think Marshall wanted to ask if you had theater training.
Maybe I'll ask about downtown Stratford first.
It's so
And-
pretty.
Yeah. Where is downtown Stratford at?
What does that mean? What a loaded question.
Yeah, so
I think it's at the Red Rabbit or Ocasio or I'm just kidding.
So Mike Farwell on our 570 News show here had the mayor of Stratford on a couple of years back.
Yeah. It's the same mayor. He's been around
and
a long time.
And he said Stratford for a bit there was known as the crystal meth capital of Canada.
Oh, yeah.
And he said,
yeah.
what did you do to, or what did many people do to kind of turn that around? And I think that's a really incredible thing that Stratford had to struggle with that and has still maintained something that I think is
I
just
did
an
not
incredible.
know that.
Yeah,
Marshall, I have so many.
just an incredibly beautiful
grew up
area.
there.
But But I've also been in downtown Stratford on a Saturday, and I've seen both sides of what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Stratford is very unique in that way. There's this wonderful little cultural bubble that tries to pretend, and with relative success, pretends that it is more voluminous in content and number of people that participate in it than the rest of the kind of rural mentality that surrounds the majority of the city. And it is mostly, I call it lately, and there's been a lot of tumultuous scenarios that have been happening in downtown Stratford, particularly in regards to the Black Lives Matter and to some racism issues coming out of the woodwork. And the reality is I've lived in Stratford and the surrounding rural areas my whole life, so it doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. So I've been calling Stratford's downtown core kind of a shaky mirage, a shaky oasis. It borders on a mirage. It's not quite not real, but it has the potential to stop being real at any moment. And we've been very blessed that there's this great core of people, probably I would say about 10 to 15% of the population of Stratford, who frequent the downtown core and are very cultural, and like the theater hub has created this kind of culture. But the reality is that it still is a majority blue collar factory working rural community. And I think sometimes people who are not from the area are surprised when they encounter that. Whereas for me, I mean, when I was in my late teens, I dated the brother of like one of the preeminent meth dealers in the city. I never did it, thankfully, but I've been around it like my whole young life. And
Wait, is this what Justin Bieber's parents were on?
Oh, Jeremy Bieber. What an interesting man. Justin Bieber's dad is the kind of guy that used to come to the bar and he'd be like, "Do you know who I am?" And I'd be like, "Yeah,
No!
you're the guy that can't pay his tab. You're not." That's my favorite encounter with Jeremy Bieber. I think anyone that says, "Do you know who I am?" is just like they need a good kick to the ribs to smarten them back up.
I'm recovering here.
But so Stratford, and have we cleaned it up? Yeah-ish. Stratford, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. We have this thing where we just pick up the corner of the rug and we just
Every city has that. I did not know that you had a meth problem. Not you personally. I did not know that Stratford
comes so far.
Could have to do some editing here.
Well, here's how I learned about it.
Please, Marshall,
I have
save
friends
me.
who live in that beautiful little town of St. Mary's, right beside Stratford. And I said, I feel like I'm in a little house in the prairie. This is the most beautiful place I've ever been. Is there any crime here? Is there anything? And the firefighter said, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There was quite a Hell's Angels presence in Stratford and tightly surrounding Milverton. Actually, Milverton, which is a smaller town yet, that's about 15 to 18 minutes from Stratford out into kind of the rural community. Massive cocaine center, like just massive, and largely due to the bikers that were hovering around. And then there's stories of, there's one particular downtown businessman who has all these stories that circulate about how in God's name does he get his money, and there's lots of chatter about the Hells Angels and different biker gangs and all this kind of whatnot, and dirty money and all that kind of stuff. But of course he's a cisgendered white dude, so we don't name him. But Stratford is very unique in that way, in that it has this beautiful look to it. But the reality is like, we've been sending you our homeless people for the last 20 years. And that's not even, like, that's not pretend. Like, the police load them into a car and they drive them to Kitchener-Waterloo and like, here, perhaps you'd like to live here because we don't have a homeless shelter, and they do. And then if they come back to Stratford, they get picked up again. And like, oh, hello, we've taken you back to Kitchener-Waterloo because
like
we
literal
don't...
street sweeping.
Yes. Yeah. And so we have this really kind of semi-fake visage of being this beautiful place, because when the tourists come, they don't want to see crime on the front page of the newspaper. And for as long as I've been alive, and as long as I've been old enough to pay attention, there's been a cycle in the newspaper. So what you'll see, or what you used to see, you don't see it quite the same anymore because it's all digital, but there used to be a real timeline. So at the beginning of the spring, just before the tourists came, there would be a clean sweep. There would be drug busts, and there would be all these things that were cleaning up the streets, and Stratford was very safe. They'd outed all of the ugliness and all the whatever that had been kind of in the corners. And then all summer, there's nothing. There's no danger. There's no trouble. Right. Bikes get stolen, planters get overturned. People dig up other people's trees in their front yard. Very strange. Apparently the people in Stratford like expensive tiny trees.
They steal trees?
But the residents like the expensive tiny trees, so they buy them and have them installed, and then the thieves know that they're expensive tiny trees, so then they go and they dig them up and they sell them. It's a very strange kind of crime.
Ingenious though.
Expensive tiny tree crime.
Wow.
But yeah, so Stratford has done, I think we've done a good job. I think a lot of it is pretending. Like it's not there. Stratford is a really staunch old boys club. They are in control of the dialogue, and they like it that way.
Also, downtown Stratford. Sorry, I was going to make a comparison to the village of St. Jacobs. Like the Love Shop is not going to move into the village. I mean, like it's got its place in a plaza somewhere. Is Stratford? Like I don't know what word to use other than protected. Is it?
Well, I think you're thinking about like zoning and planning. Like
somehow Stratford also just
Yeah, there's a heritage district group that are very specific, and building and planning are very difficult in Stratford. They're actually known. I know some architects that won't work in downtown Stratford because of how difficult city building and planning is. I keep opening restaurants down there. It's a nightmare. Still building and planning, the red tape and all of this madness. But I'm learning to navigate it every time I learn new things. We're relatively picky. They're picky about signage. So a lot of corporate type signs can't exist in the heritage district. And so they can kind of keep places out or at bay based on as much as aesthetic as anything else. There's social pressure. It's quaint and it's supposed to be. It's a little different than St. Jacobs in that St. Jacobs is it wants to be quaint. Stratford wants to be cosmopolitan. Stratford thinks it's more cultural than it is quaint. It likes its cuteness, but it wants to be more fashionable. St. Jacobs wants to be cute and quaint and small and welcoming, and they want to keep that. Whereas we want to present kind of the forefront of big city amenities with small town charm, kind of blended together.
I think about how when you and Zach filmed your videos, you probably, framing the shots, didn't have to do a whole lot of avoiding of anything. Everything looks...
This one doesn't have to try. It's natural.
Everything just looks amazing. And first of all, there's a huge absence of people for some reason when you were filming those videos. But also, just the way Stratford looks in that area just is gorgeous. It all makes it into the shot. And
Yeah, it's very easy. There's only, as aforementioned, there's one business that we try to avoid when filming right in the core and we did so relatively successfully. And so aside from that, though, the river, that whole scene under the bridge, particularly in this most recent one where we're flying on this magic carpet, is gorgeous. It's a gorgeous city. Like, it really is. It's beautiful, and we're very blessed to live there. The downtown is quaint and walkable, and it really is cosmopolitan in that there's way more restaurants per capita than you would get, and way more good restaurants per capita than you would get in a town of our size. If you compare us to like Woodstock, there's not nearly as many restaurants or good restaurants. I think there's like one, and Stratford has 82 or something. It really, I mean, as much as it's like, it's playing the part, but it is what it is presenting. It has its ugliness, but every place does, right? So I don't want to give the idea. I love Stratford, and I keep slagging
Everybody
away
does.
in spite of it being an old boys club, in spite of all the challenges.
Yeah, but you're
I think
living and working and building within it. So that's a different story than us who are like, let's go to Stratford today.
It's so beautiful, right?
it's a
Even my
destination.
children say that. Let's go to Stratford. Are the ice cream shops open?
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
hope things are still there, like the toy store left after a little while ago. And
Yeah, Family and Company was around forever. It was a staple. Like, it was a childhood dream. It was something that everybody went for. But again, there's a cycle. There's a life cycle to every kind of business, particularly something that is opened in a small town, that is opened by people who are very passionate about it. Anything that is opened with passion and dedication and honesty, I think, has a natural shelf life, because the people who started it will get tired someday. Family and Company was around for probably 20 years, maybe more. It was sold from the original owners and then sold the second time. When it sold the second time, I think the people who bought it the first time after the original owners had it really felt that passion, and they'd grown up with it, and it was really a part of their own culture, so they continued to do it. But when they sold it again, the interest in that, any small business, not just restaurants, in that investment of time and that really long kind of arduous journey of trying to create something, and the amount of hours you have to work to really make that go in a small business, can take some people out of the game if they don't have that passion, and if they don't have that origin story that takes them along that path. I know that someday people talk to me about this regularly, like, you won't be able to let go of your restaurants. You won't be able to see someone else run them. And I'm like, oh yeah, I will. I will. because I know, and I see that, and I see it so clearly that
When you're done, you're done.
right? And what the Red Rabbit becomes, or what Old Man and Son becomes, or what Avec becomes. I mean, the Red Rabbit is the one that kind of has the heart and the soul to it, because it was the first one. What it becomes when we have given it away doesn't matter. It can't matter, because it's not. I would love to have someone step in who has the same amount of passion and the same amount of interest in creating and building and growing something that is focused as much on the people as the profits. But I can't guarantee that. And if I were to let it make my brain explode, I would be doing a disservice to the memory of what we had created itself. So I think you have to, for everything there is a season, and you have to be willing to go through that and to let it go at some point as well, and to understand that it's actually kind of more special if it's not forever. You know, there's something really beautiful about a time and a place, and about a memory of something that was really special, and that it's not here anymore, because those kinds of good things don't last forever.
What would I pay if I could stay, wine glass in hand? Betcha they'll say, please go away. There's no dining due to COVID, empty tables, waiters' fables, so please let me stay. I'm ready to know what the servers know. Ask stupid questions and get weird answers. What's habanero and why does it, what's the word, burn? When's it my turn? I need table 1. I want to make a reservation. Away from the street. Someday I'll eat part of that world.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.